the latest, Niger junta has taken control of a uranium mine, which was operated by a French nuclear firm called Orano. The firm says it has lost the operational control of the Somaïr mine in Niger.
Right now, as you're watching this, there is a line of trucks parked behind the wire of a military airbase in Niger's capital, right here. They haven't moved in months. They are heavily guarded, and sitting on the back of those trucks is roughly $250 million worth of rock. But not just any rock, it is uranium, the literal fuel used to split atoms and power the modern world. And this specific pile came from this single open pit mine right here called Somaïr. Now for 50 years, this map looked exactly like this. Rock comes out of the ground and it travels in one direction, north, straight to France.
From 2005 to 2020, Niger ranked as the third largest source of natural uranium for France, providing 19% of its supply.
You see, France gets about 70% of its electricity from nuclear power. It is the most nuclear-dependent country on earth, and for decades they rely on Niger, landlocked desert nation, for up to a fifth of their entire supply. It was a perfect, highly profitable pipeline, until 2 years ago when everything broke. In a series of stunning geopolitical moves, Niger did the unthinkable.
Demonstrators have been rallying outside France's military base in the capital Niamey this Sunday. The demands are clear. They want to see the French troops out of the country.
We don't want the French anymore. We don't like them. They say Niger is a poor country, but when we tell them to leave, they refuse.
They kick out the French military, they kick out the US military, and then they look at a massive multi-billion-dollar French corporation that had been digging up their land for half a century, and they said, we are taking our rock back. We're taking this company back. And they did. Niger won. The mine is theirs. This brings us to the part I couldn't stop thinking about. If Niger won, if the rock is finally theirs, why is $250 million of it sitting on this truck in the middle of desert, going absolutely nowhere? Because right now, 4 of the most powerful empires on earth are staring at this stretch of road, waiting to see who gets to move that pie. And to understand how a stranded convoy in the desert became one of the most important objects in global energy, I want to start with what makes the ground here so valuable in the first place. If you travel 1,200 kilometers north of Niger's capital, deep into the open Sahara, you will find these 2 towns, Alit and Akokan. And to be completely honest, there is absolutely no geographical reason for towns to exist out here, except for one thing. The French found buried under this sand in the late 1950s, uranium, but specifically high-grade uranium. See, in the mining world, grade is everything. Higher grade means more usable stuff per ton of rock. It means even if global prices crash, a mine out here can still make massive profit. Now let's pause for a second, because the internet constantly exaggerates this. Niger is not Africa's biggest uranium producer. That's Namibia. Globally, Niger actually only supplies about 5% of the world's mined uranium. So this story is never about massive volume, it's about leverage. And it was about one specific customer, France, a country that gets a staggering 70% of its electricity from nuclear power. It is the most nuclear-dependent major economy on earth, and to keep the lights on in Paris, France has to import every single gram of uranium. For 50 years, their most reliable pipeline was right here in their former colony. In 2022, Niger was the second largest supplier of uranium to the entire European Union. And for decades, a French state-owned company called Orano basically ran the show. They owned the majority stake, they set the prices, they kept the tech. Niger got a minority share of its own rock. If you like what I'm doing on this channel, please like and subscribe, and let me know what your opinion is under the comment section. Back to the video. And that lopsided partnership created a deep generational grievance Keep that in mind because it is the emotional engine for everything that happens next. For over a decade, uranium was a market nobody wanted. After the Fukushima disaster in 2011, countries panicked, shut down reactors, and the price flatlined around $50 a pound. Mines could barely afford to stay open. Then last year, the chart did this. Prices skyrocketed to a 16-year high, breaking past $100 a pound. Why? A massive perfect storm. First, government realized they need nuclear to hit climate goals. Second, the AI boom happened. Data centers require a monstrous amount of electricity, and the tech giants started scrambling to buy up dedicated nuclear capacity. And then came the ultimate supply shock. The US banned import of Russian enriched uranium following the war in Ukraine. Russia was a massive player in the nuclear fuel game. Cutting them out meant every single non-Russia source of uranium on Earth suddenly became gold. Let's be totally honest here, the world didn't physically run out of uranium, but the market went from sleepy to absolutely obsessed with supply security. Everyone started looking nervously at the map for a stable, high-grade supply. And right at that exact moment, Niger had a revolution. On July 26, 2023, soldiers from Niger's Presidential Guard surrounded the home of President Mohamed Bazoum. This was the guy who had just achieved Niger's first ever peaceful democratic transfer of power. 2 days later, the head of that guard, General Chani, walked onto state television and declared himself the new ruler. In the West, the media reacted with the usual headlines: another African coup, another fragile state collapsing, but that completely missed the bigger picture. Niger wasn't a random, isolated event. It was a third domino. Look at the map. Mali had its coup in 2020 and 2021. Burkina Faso in 2022. And all of these military leaders were riding the exact same wave of public anger. Anger that Western-backed government couldn't stop regional violence, and a deep frustration with French influence that felt like a colonization that never truly ended. So when Niger's new military government took power, they were not winging it. They immediately formed a new bloc called the Alliance of Sahel States, a mutual defense pact. These guys had a strategy, a shared grievance, and a feeling that the global geopolitical board was finally shifting in their favor. And step number 1 of that strategy: push out the Western military presence. France was the first to go. For years, French troops were stationed here to fight regional militant groups. But after the coup, massive protests erupted outside the French embassy. The military government tore up their military deals, and by December 2023, the last French soldier packed up and left. But then came the loss that really shocked the geopolitical world. See, France was the old colonial power, but the country with the absolute biggest physical bet in the sand was the United States. Right here outside the desert hub of Agadez, the United States military built Air Base 201. It cost $110 million, the largest construction project in US Air Force history. This was the crown jewel of American surveillance. From this single runway, US Reaper drones could watch over militant movement across half the African continent. Washington tried everything to hold on to it. For months, Washington avoided making a formal coup determination while trying to preserve military cooperation. It failed. By March 2024, the military government cancelled the agreement. By September, the last of 1,000 American personnel walked down this runway and flew away. A decade of Western military strategy gone. And here is the detail that shows you just how insane this new world order is. As American forces were packing their bags to leave the airfield, Russian military personnel were arriving at a military facility in Niger, including around Agadez. These were not regular Russian army troops. They belonged to the African Corps, the newly rebranded successor to the infamous Wagner mercenary network, is the Kremlin's favorite tool for projecting power without official accountability. Mali and Burkina Faso had already brought them in. Now, Niger did too. And this is the exact moment the rest of the world realized this wasn't just a local military coup, it was a massive geopolitical pivot. Niger and Russia signed official nuclear cooperation pacts. The military government started openly talking about selling their uranium to new buyers like Russia and Turkey. Then they turned to their oil, demanding to renegotiate their multi-billion-dollar deal with the China National Petroleum Corporation, calling the old terms completely unfair. Then they did something completely unprecedented. They officially quit ECOWAS, the main economic alliance of West Africa. 3 of the poorest, most landlocked nations on earth basically looked at their wealthier neighbors and the Western powers backing them and said the old rules are dead. Niger was completely repositioning itself on the global chessboard, and the reason every empire kept watching them comes back to that rock in the north. Through 2024 and 2025, the military government went after the foreign mining operation piece by piece. First, they stripped the French company Orano of the permit for Uranium, one of the largest untapped deposits on earth. A month later, they kick out a Canadian company from the Madawela deposit. And they went for the crown jewel, Somaïr, the single most productive active uranium mine in the country. In June 2025, Niger went all the way. They nationalized the mine. They declared the old treaties expired, called the seizure an act of full sovereignty, and labeled France an openly hostile state. The French fought back using the only leverage they had left, international arbitration. They filed an emergency case at the World Bank's Investment Tribunal. In September 2025, the tribunal issued provisional measures ordering Niger to temporarily freeze movement of the roughly 1,500 tons of uranium stockpiled at the mine while the dispute continued. And this brings us to the ultimate bizarre contradiction of the entire saga. Niger won the hardest thing you can possibly win in geopolitics. They held the ground. The mine is inside their borders. Their soldiers are holding the gate. There is no Western army left in the country to stop them. On paper, the rock belongs to Niger. But as it turns out, controlling territory and controlling movement are two completely different things. Look at the map. Niger is completely landlocked. Historically, every single pound of this uranium had to be trucked south across border to port in Benin to be shipped to the world. But because of the coup, that border was slammed shut. The only alternative route run directly through war zones infested with the same security crisis the military government cited as one of its main reasons for taking power. So the rock that Niger fought a global empire to control, it is legally radioactive, internationally disputed, and physically stuck in the sand. Niger completely shattered a relationship that defined their country for half a century. They proved to the entire world that the wealth under sand belongs to people living on top of it. And that has triggered a massive shift across the entire Sahara. But that same act of defiance has frozen their entire economy. Uranium production has crashed by more than half. The new partners they have invited in, like Russia, always come with a hidden cost. And the deeper question of whether a cash-strapped military government can run a radioactive mine safely without poisoning the local desert water is something nobody can answer yet. Which brings us right back to these trucks, $250 million of the world's most dangerous fuel sitting completely still under desert sun. Niger has the rock. They have the sovereignty, but for now the map is frozen, and 4 global empires are just standing by waiting to see who makes the first move. If you love definitive African infrastructure projects, geopolitics, and development happening in Africa, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section what you think about this. See you on the next one.